This is TLC to go.
Welcome to this deep dive, and this one's really designed for you, our dedicated faculty colleagues in the health sciences.
That's right. We know you're focused on giving your students the absolute best preparation for their careers.
And that's why today we're getting into problem-based learning, or PBL.
Exactly. PBL. It's a strategy many of you might have heard about, maybe even used. Our aim here is to give a clear overview and some really practical tips specifically for the health sciences context.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. PBL, at its heart, it's student-centered, right?
Totally. You picture small groups of students, say 4, maybe 6 people.
Uh-huh.
And they're presented with a really complex, messy, real-world type problem. Something without one single easy answer.
And what makes it different, say, from just a case study?
That's a great question. The key difference really is that the students themselves figure out what they need to learn. They identify their own knowledge gaps to solve the problem.
Ah, okay, so they're driving their own learning objectives.
Precisely. Which means the instructor role shifts quite dramatically. You become more of a facilitator, a guide, less of the traditional sage on the stage.
Got it. So the mission for us today is really to clarify PBL and, importantly, offer some concrete teaching strategies you can actually use in your health sciences courses.
Let's start with the big question then. Why even bother with PBL? Why should health sciences faculty consider it?
Good place to start. Is there evidence it actually works?
There is actually quite a bit, especially around how well students hang on to information long-term and can, apply it later.
Okay, like what?
Well, there was a study, U&Go in 2016, that really emphasized PBL for better long-term retention.
Right. Retention is key. Anything more specific to health sciences?
Definitely. Galvao and colleagues back in 2014 looked at pharmacy students. They found those in PBL settings actually did better on midterms and finals.
Interesting. Better exam scores.
And thinking bigger picture about training competent professionals. Coe and others in 2008 found that using PBL during medical school seemed to positively impact how competent physicians were after graduation in practice.
Wow, okay. So the way we teach really can have that kind of long-term impact on clinical competence.
It seems so. It really underlines the importance of the pedagogical choices you make.
And it's not just about knowledge recall, is it? PBL seems geared towards skills, too.
Absolutely. Zakrasek and Nilsson mentioned this recently. PBL really pushes students to develop problem-solving skills, critical thinking, definitely communication.
And teamwork, which is huge in healthcare.
Enormous.
Yeah.
And that ambiguity in a good PBL problem, it often forces students to figure out roles, negotiate, communicate effectively within their group. It kind of mirrors that interprofessional dynamic they'll face later.
That makes sense. And didn't Barrows way back talk about the core goals of PBL?
He did, Howard Barrows, back in '86. His objectives still feel really relevant for health sciences educators. Things like structuring knowledge so it's useful in a clinical context.
Right, not just for a test, but for actual patient care.
Exactly. And developing clinical reasoning skills. That whole process of analyzing symptoms, weighing evidence, deciding on action, PBL exercises that constantly.
Okay. What else did he mention?
Enhancing self-directed learning, which is crucial for lifelong learning in medicine, right?
Okay.
And also just boosting motivation, making learning more engaging.
So the why seems pretty compelling. Okay, let's shift gears then. How do faculty actually do this? Let's get practical.
Right. Implementation. Our sources, like the one from Faculty Focus on Developing PBL Activities, lay out some steps.
Where do you start?
First things first, before you even dream up a problem, pin down your learning objectives. What do you want students to actually know or be able to do by the end?
Makes sense. Gotta have a target.
You absolutely do. It gives focus. Then, armed with those objectives, you craft the problem itself.
And this sounds like where the art comes in.
It really is. The problem needs to be realistic, complex enough, maybe a bit messy, like real health challenges.
Not just a simple diagnosis.
Ideally, no. Maybe it incorporates ethical dilemmas or resource constraints, communication issues, alongside the clinical stuff. Something that forces integration of knowledge.
Okay, so you have your objectives, you have your killer problem. Then what? Just throw it at the students.
Probably not the best approach. You need to introduce PBL carefully. Set expectations clearly, explain their role as active learners, how it differs from lectures.
Manage expectations, basically.
Exactly. Maybe even a quick intro session on the process. Then, the logistics form in groups. That 4 to 6 member range usually works well.
Right. And then the instructor's role, the big shift.
Yes, becoming that facilitator. You're guiding, asking probing questions, maybe pointing towards resources, but crucially, not just giving answers.
You're helping them think, not just telling them what to think.
That's a great way to put it. You're coaching their problem-solving process.
Okay, one more practical piece, assessment. How do you grade this? It sounds different from grading a multiple choice test.
It is different because you're not just looking at the final solution.
Yeah.
You're interested in their process, their collaboration, their critical thinking along the way, how well they directed their own learning.
So, more holistic.
Yeah, you'd likely use multiple methods, maybe group presentations, individual reflections on what they learned and how, perhaps peer evaluations within the group.
Maybe even looking at the quality of the questions they ask during the process.
That's a really good one, yes. It shows their engagement and thinking.
Okay, it helps to also think about it from the student side. What's their experience like?
Good point. That Cornell resource on the steps for students is helpful here. Their first step is really just digging into the problem, examining it, defining it, making sure everyone's on the same page.
Getting a handle on what they're actually supposed to solve.
Right. Then, critically, they start thinking about what they already know that might be relevant, activating prior knowledge.
And that naturally leads to
Identifying the gaps. What don't we know that we need to know to solve this? That's the self-directed learning piece kicking in.
Okay, so they identify the gaps, then what?
Then they figure out how to fill those gaps. What information do we need? Where can we find it? What resources are credible? They start doing their research, exploring.
Taking initiative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
After that, they come back together, share what they found, evaluate potential solutions, work collaboratively towards an answer or a plan.
And finally, they need to communicate their findings, right?
Yes. Reporting back.
Yeah.
That could be a presentation, a written report, maybe even a simulated patient encounter, depending on the learning goals you set initially.
So listening to all this, it really feels like PBL lines up perfectly with what we're trying to do in health sciences education.
I think so too.
Yeah.
It's all about prepping students for those complex, ambiguous clinical situations they will face and building that capacity for lifelong learning.
Because medicine and healthcare never stand still.
Never. And think about those skills again: critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, communication. PBL actively grows those muscles.
Muscles they absolutely need to be effective healthcare professionals today.
Couldn't agree more. In today's collaborative environment, those are non-negotiables.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive here. The big takeaways for PBL and health sciences seem to be better long-term knowledge retention.
Right, developing those crucial professional skills we just talked about.
And generally a more engaging, maybe more motivating way for students to learn.
And remember the core ideas. It's student-driven, uses complex real-world problems, and your role shifts to being a facilitator.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for our listeners to chew on.
Yeah.
Thinking about your own courses right now, how might you adapt or maybe even just integrate some principles of PBL, even small steps? How could that help empower your students even more for their future careers?
That's a great question to ponder. It doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing switch.
Definitely not. And if you are interested in exploring this further, we want to point you towards a great local resource, the UTHSC Teaching and Learning Center.
Oh, yes, the TLC is fantastic. And their website has a ton of resources, too. Check out the resources section.
They can definitely offer support and more detailed guidance if you're considering trying out PBL.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, your work as educators is just so vital in shaping our future healthcare providers.
Truly. We hope this deep dive into PBL has given you some valuable food for thought as you continue that incredibly important work.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
And we'll see you next time.